Um, did you? Yeah, you.
Here is a very short bio.
In the chat would be great. Okay, great. We're live. All right. Good morning, New Mexico. It is a beautiful day in the neighborhood indeed. Welcome to Cafecito con Colon on this beautiful Sábado Gigante. It is outstanding. Let me just say, I was outside at 5 o'clock this morning so that I could do my 6.2 miles, 5,000 or 10,000 meters, and it was 69 degrees this morning. So it is going to be a beautiful day here in the land of enchantment, the Tierra del Encanto, the 47 star on that beautiful flag of the United States of America. And I have a fantastic guest with me today, somebody who I have admired and been really just honored to be on his journey with him as he's come into being such a tremendous leader in our community in so many ways. We're going to get to know Marshall Martinez today, who is the executive director of EQNM. And for those of you that don't know this, a couple of you over time have asked me about my little equality things here. You didn't know what they were, but they're always right behind me over my shoulder. I keep it close to camera here, but we got all kinds of great things that I've gotten from EQNM with my support that I've given over the years, my stickers, and this one's just awesome. Check that out. Look at the creativity there. That is just solid. And then of course, you got to know what that is to know what it is. But this one, I love that signal. I just love this one. But it's always right behind me because we're always flying the flag for EQNM because they're doing really important work in our community when it comes to lifting up a population that has been marginalized for so long, but never again, not here in our land of enchantment, because we've got great leadership. We've got great messaging to educate the public so they can embrace and enrich every one of us here in New Mexico. And I am just thrilled you're able to join us this morning. Marshall, can you hear me okay? You're looking good over there.
Everything's perfect. Good morning. It's so good to see you, sir.
It is great to have you with me. I am so pleased. It's going to be a fantastic morning on this Sábado Gigante. And I think what we'll do, Marshall, I'm going to put up just a few links this morning because I want to spend the vast majority of my time listening to you and learning from you as I always do. So if you don't mind, I'm going to just break away here for a second and we'll put up a few links. Is that all right?
That's perfect.
All right, good. Sit tight, fill up your coffee cup, and I'll be right back. All right, my friends. So let's see here. Let me get on to it here. We want to put up just a few links for those of you that follow me on my social media feed. Let's see here. How come I can't find our current string? This is the problem. So as many of you know, Facebook is defaulting to friends only when you go to live feed. So you have to manually switch it over to a public feed. We've done that now. So I need you, Jennifer Gomez Chavez, Dr. Lawrence Roybal, Joe, Dr. McCaffrey, Damian, do me a favor, share this video before we bring Marshall back to camera today, because we're going to have a great episode of Cafecito con Colon on this Sábado Gigante. But again, the video defaults to friends only. So we got to get the word out there so people can see this great message we're bringing about the important work of EQNM, Equality New Mexico, supporting, lifting up, educating the community about our LGBTQIA+ community and the great and important difference they make every day here in our land of enchantment. So share this video. Let's get it out there. Before we go further, I am going to make sure that we put up just a few links. One's a personal. You know that I'm a big fan of John F. Kennedy, our president. Today, interestingly enough, is the anniversary of the day he received his medals in history. So for those of you that know his life of service, you know that he received the highest honor for gallantry in the Navy for his actions as a gunboat pilot during World War II. That happened on June 12, 1944. He also got a Purple Heart for wounds that he received during that battle. You know, interestingly enough, a lot of people don't know this, but little John Kennedy really wanted to go into the Navy, but they rejected him. They said, sorry, dude, you've got chronic health issues. That back injury is absolutely going to keep you out of service. But he continued to lean in, so to speak. And then frankly, I think the true story is his dad was extremely well engaged in the community and in the political landscape and in the government landscape. And I think they used that influence to make sure that John F. Kennedy could actually serve in the Navy, and then did so with distinction and put himself in harm's way and got those medals. So that's Brian Colon's little, oh, you know what else came in the mail? Check this out. Kennedy Justice. This is fantastic. So this book is as old as I am. I couldn't find it in print, but I got this old copy that I ordered offline. It's all tattered. It smells just like you would expect a book to smell that is 51 years old. It's the same age as I am. This was printed in 1970 and by Navasky. And this is a great book about Kennedy justice. So this is about Attorney General Kennedy, and just a fantastic piece of history that covers a lot of the work and life and journey of Robert F. Kennedy, who would have continued service leadership, but unfortunately was taken too soon. But this book is just an amazing reflection upon somebody who went from running his brother's campaign to becoming the Attorney General of the United States, and was often criticized because he hadn't spent a lifetime in the courtroom, but he understood the power and the importance of the role of the Attorney General, whether you're a state's Attorney General or the Attorney General of the United States, that it is a transformative office and has capacity that is far more reaching than just prosecutorial authority. It touches in every area of our lives. He understood how that office would lead the way when it came to bringing civil rights to America for all people. And unfortunately, he was taken too soon, but this is a great book. I just started getting into it again, and I'm so excited. This landed yesterday. So Marshall Martinez is thinking, what in the world does that have to do with EQNM? And the answer is absolutely nothing, Marshall, but it's my show, so I get to start the first 10 minutes with my stuff, and that is one of my things. So, okay, let me get a little more topical for you here. A couple things, today is, and for those of you that follow my social media, you know that I posted this morning early at 5 or 6 o'clock regarding, good morning, Honorable Leo Aramillo, welcome back. Gracias por venir hoy. It was great to have you as a guest yesterday. Good morning, Dr. Lang. We got an overrepresentation of PhDs today on Cafecito con Colón for our guests. Thanks for tuning in again today. Good to see you, Tweety. Buenos dias, le de Dios. Good to see everybody. Kenny Crow. Thank you for dropping by this morning. So this is the 5th anniversary of the incredibly painful Pulse shooting that took 49 lives, including the life of the gunman. I think it was 48 plus the gunman, and injuring 50 or 60 others. And on this 5th anniversary, the first thing I wanted to post, I had a couple people inquire, actually while I was on the campaign trail, educate us about this ghost guns. What is this issue about ghost guns? And I love the blog, The Conversation, pretty much ad-free or really clean blog that has fantastic articles. And this one here really is a good one regarding ghost guns. And the headline is, "What are ghost guns? A target of Biden's anti-crime effort." So check that out when you have some time. And then let me give you a little bit of coverage on this 5th anniversary of the very, very painful shooting at Pulse. And here's the CNN piece. Here is, oh man, I lost the other link. I had another good link out of Florida. One of the Florida newspapers, the Tampa paper, I think it was. They had a fantastic article I saw this morning, but I've lost it. Here it is, tampabay.com. So check those articles out. Take some time to think about the underlying issues surrounding that horrible mass murder there in Tampa Bay. And this here, the tampabay.com LGBTQ community reflects on 5 years since the Pulse shooting. And then finally, I'll do my quick shout of support for DPNM. They have put out a bunch of merch to lift up the celebration of Pride Month and also make a few bucks monetizing this celebration of what is Pride 2021. So check that out there. And with that, oh, the last thing I'm going to put up, here I come, Marshall. So better be ready for me because here I come. Let's see here. I wanted to put up the link for my post early this morning. I actually added to my profile and to the link promoting this great visit this morning. I added a link in case folks want to do the right thing and drop a couple shekels into EQNM for the good work they do. I put in there Chai. For those of you that don't know, Chai is the number 18, representing good fortune, representing life, abundance, luck, all kinds of things. But there is the link. If you want to make a contribution to EQNM, you can do it through that little Facebook fundraiser. Zero fees on Facebook. One of the great things about Facebook is when they do those Facebook online fundraising opportunities, they actually absorb the cost of the transaction. So that is pretty cool. I don't even think you can do that through EQNM Direct. I think there is a small fee that goes with the ones that you do online there. So I'm going to ask you to do it through my Facebook link. Not only that, I want to raise a couple $100. So help me get there, because otherwise I'll have to close the gap again. And I got to get permission from Aleli, and it gets all complicated because I got to ask for permission if it's a donation more than $18. So with that, let me just say I have got a fantastic opportunity to shine a beautiful spotlight on this Sabido Gigante, on the important work of EQNM during Pride 2021 and year round. Because for this organization, it's not Pride Month. It is a 365-day-a-year effort. And last year, 366 days, because it was a leap year. So they don't miss a day of being incredible advocates, making sure that they don't just have a seat at the table, but they're at the head of the table. Because for far too long, this community has been on the margins. And whether it's the overrepresentation of hatred that they have to deal with in our community, injury they have to deal with, or even their own, because of the marginalization over these last several generations, the burden that is one that each individual often carries as they try and process and being able to embrace their fullness. And these are my words, and I'm not an expert. And so know that this comes from a place of love and support. If there is anything that I say that is off track, I know that Marshall and I are close enough. He will help move me back into a position of being better informed. But I'll just say, from where I sit and having watched my sister on her journey to her fullness, where I see her now, the beautiful, beautiful woman that she is, as I get ready in a few months to walk her down the aisle. This is a personal issue for me. When I was one of the first chairs in the United States of America to be chairing a state Democratic Party and supporting same-sex marriage, I was, along with California, I think one of the first. And it was not necessarily a universally popular position to take in all 33 counties of New Mexico. I'm very pleased to say that while we're out in front, the rest of New Mexico, by and large, has come around to understand that love is love and that nobody in our community should be marginalized. And during Pride 2021, it's a perfect opportunity for all of us to know better so that we can do better and be better. And no one has helped me more in this space than Marshall Martinez. And I have watched him grow from a young man. I mean, I feel like when I first met him, I feel like he might have even been in high school or just barely new to college. But he was just such a young man who was full of spirit and coming into his own, and just a warm person who was in my universe. When I think about people who helped me be a better person, at least in terms of being informed and becoming a good ally, I think of Marshall. I think of Chris Salas, who affirmed me. Chris Salas affirmed me and gave me strength because he watched me from the sidelines, saw some of the things I did, and he came out bold and said, "Let me just tell you what I just observed you do, and let me affirm that person who you are." I feel like that really helped me grow because there's nothing I like to do more than empower, inspire, lift up, and support young people. So when young Chris told me that, I think for me in my journey, I think that was a very important moment. And I don't know that I've ever shared with Chris that was a really important moment in time for me, but he's so generous in sharing his thoughts about me and the support I've given him over the years. But Chris, if you watch this episode, I think those are some words I haven't shared with you, and I'm glad to do it today. So let me, on that note, let me be more specific about the excellent individual and incredible human being that Marshall Martinez is. He's an organizer. He's been a political strategist for tons of campaigns, organizations, community advocacy groups, informally, formally, as a volunteer, on staff. This gentleman gets it done. He's fought climate change with the League of Conservation Voters. He's worked on making sure that working class families can earn living wages. He makes sure that women and great men have the opportunity to have equal wages. He has said so many times that his area of passion is lifting up young people on their journey. And he has done it so effectively, whether he's worked in high schools where he's educated young people about having safe sex, or even being comfortable as, like I said, as they are coming into their fullness. Because when young people come into their fullness, our community is enriched and lifted up as a whole. We are better because of our LGBTQIA plus community. Most recently, he was the New Mexico Director of Public Affairs at Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains, where he led the charge to grow the department in New Mexico. And he strongly believes in the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And that's where I think he is so effective. And now he is already leading with distinction. He was interim executive director, and I called him up and I said, we got to drop that interim just as soon as we possibly can, because you are a tremendous transformational leader. EQNM is lucky to have you at the helm, and I'm lucky to have you as a friend. And with that, I just want to say, Marshall Martinez, I love you. Welcome to Cafecito con Colon on this 5th anniversary of a very tragic event. But more importantly, as we celebrate, lift up, and embrace the values that is Pride. So happy Pride, Marshall Martinez.
Good morning. Happy Pride, sir. It's so good to be with you this morning.
Well, I appreciate you joining me today. I know it's a busy day for you, and it's always a busy day for you. I've never seen you in slow motion. I know you say if you want to go far, you go slow and you take others with you. But on the other hand, you're slow as everybody else is fast. So we just pedal as quickly as we can so we can go with you wherever you're going. And I appreciate that energy you bring to all the work you do and the true passion. And I think the reason you bring that energy and passion in such a special way, Marshall, is because of the authenticity of the work you do. You have never worked in a space where you didn't have a deep conviction that you knew you'd be able to make a difference. And that has been true with EQNM. This is a return. This is like Marshall Martinez 2.0 EQNM on fire every day forward. Tell us about the journey, Marshall. I Googled and there's just too many hits. I mean, I could tell so many things about you, but I mentioned just a few. Tell us a few things more about your journey that maybe you'd like our viewers here on Cafecito con Colon to know about Marshall Martinez.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And first, I just have to say thanks so much for the phenomenal introduction. Nobody ever makes me feel as confident and hyped up as you do. And so I appreciate that so very much. As you pointed out in introducing me, I did work to educate young people about safer sex when I was in high school. And that's where my organizing, although I didn't know there was a name for it back then, right? But that's where my journey in this world began. I was born and raised in Alamogordo, New Mexico. I was involved in peer education, and at Alamogordo High School, when I was a junior, I was suspended from high school because I was giving condoms to my classmates because, surprise, teenagers have sex in high school. Although many people would like to believe that just doesn't happen, that's not true. And I was doing everything I could to make sure that my peers were able to protect themselves. This was a time, it's especially important to know as I betray my age, this was a time when people were still really ill and sometimes still dying of HIV and AIDS. And so it was really, really critical to me that we make sure that we give young people an opportunity to protect themselves. And so I was suspended from high school for distributing condoms on campus. And I sort of learned then, because of the amazing support that so many people in my family and so many of my friends gave me, that I had a couple of choices, right? I could follow the rules and watch my friends and peers not have access to the tools they need, or I could, what I now will affectionately say, raise a little bit of hell and change the rules. And so I didn't know in high school it was called community organizing. I certainly didn't know you could make a career out of it. But I started doing some work to organize teachers and school board members. And I'm very proud to say that it's no longer against the rules in most school districts across the state to have things like condoms on campus and distribute those. And that was really when I discovered that I had a calling in myself to do whatever I could to make the community around me healthier, safer, more comfortable, and more vibrant for lots of folks. And then, of course, I came out in high school at around that same time. And as one could imagine, in the late 90s and early 2000s in Alamogordo, New Mexico, I certainly learned then also that life was not going to be particularly easy for somebody like me, although I had a phenomenal family. I really saw firsthand how many young LGBTQ folks, how many young gay men in my high school didn't have the family support and didn't have the love. And so while I've worked at labor unions and I'm super proud of my work at Planned Parenthood and League of Conservation Voters, I think that the thing I try to do most frequently is make sure that we are moving the world to a place where young queer and trans people can find safety and support and love and compassion, so that we can grow up into our fullness, as you said, right? So that we can grow up and live in our fullness in a way that is safe and healthy for us. And so that's just a little bit of how I started to do this work. But I will say, if you had told 16-year-old me that there was a word for what we were doing, or that you could get a job doing it, and that you could live as an adult for quite a while doing that, I would have been stunned back then.
Well, I'm glad that we are stunning you, because we need you in this space. And thank you for really opening up this conversation in a very robust way. You've hit on so many topics in just a few minutes there that we could just spend the next few hours unpacking that stuff. But let's try and do a little bit of it. Before we do that, I want to just say there's a couple other folks that tuned in this morning. I'm very pleased to see that Chris was tuned in. Chris, I was probably pretty, there had to be a more artful way for me to say what I was trying to say. But I think you know the situation I was talking about. We were in rural New Mexico, and somebody hit me pretty hard on this issue, and Chris was with me, and he observed the whole thing. And I'll never forget that moment, Chris, and then how you talked to me about it afterwards. Michael Rehuerta, another great young man who I've had the privilege of pouring into just a little bit, not enough, Michael Rehuerta, but you know I'm in your corner, and I've always enjoyed any chance I've had to be able to be your advocate. We've got great folks. Jeremy Maesta, Senator Jaramillo is still with us and tuned in, saying great things about you, Marshall. Dr. Roybal, Dr. Gomez Chavez, lots of beautiful comments here. And I hope, Anna Marie Dahl, here we go. Moms Demand Action. And thank you, Anna Marie. I hope you saw that I posted every town, their link and their article regarding 5 years later. So thank you, Anna Marie Dahl, for making me a better person and for your leadership with such an important organization. We're grateful, and it was great to have you as a guest, and still love my Moms Demand Action mug. Thank you very much. So Marshall, let's maybe one of the things I'd like to do before we get too far down the road is I want to be very intentional about educating my Cafecito colleagues, or my extrovert therapists, as I call them. Let's educate them a lot about this work, right? Like that was a beautiful kind of snapshot of you and your journey going all the way back to high school, from condom carrying passer outer to your incredible impact now. But let's talk a little bit more specifically, and I'll post a link to EQNM's main landing page right now. But let's talk a little bit about kind of your core mission with EQNM.
Yeah, absolutely. So Equality New Mexico is a 28-year-old organization. I think it's really important just for folks to know that. Incidentally, the first organization that hired me to be an organizer. It was the place that I learned that you could make a living doing this. So in coming into this role, I feel like I'm coming back home to my political home. We were founded in 1993 at a time when in New Mexico, it was still legal to fire someone for being gay or lesbian or trans, and certainly long before marriage equality or any of those things. And so the organization was founded really with the mission of passing policies, legislation, doing the civil rights work, the advocacy work to create a state where LGBTQ folks live with policy equality, right? And that was the mindset back in the 90s. And I'm so glad to say that we've shifted and evolved and grown. The mission for Equality New Mexico now really is, it's much more broad. As we've all learned, all of our struggles are intersectional, right? And so, the work that we do now is to make sure that we're removing the barriers, systemic barriers at the state level, at the city level, at the school district level, removing the barriers that are in place that prevent LGBTQ people from being able to thrive. And so, you know, we now in New Mexico, it's against the law to fire somebody for being queer or trans. We have anti-bullying legislation. A few years ago, we banned conversion therapy, which is great because that's just child abuse.
Hey, Marshall,
yeah.
real quick. I think it's only come up once on Cafecito in the last 15 months. Can you, I certainly am very tuned into the issue, was very supportive on that legislation, but can you talk just real quick for any folks that don't know what conversion therapy, I mean, even saying conversion therapy just seems so ridiculous, but go ahead.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that. And for that reminder, not everybody lives in this world and understands this terminology, right? So conversion therapy is the name that folks use for it, although I think you're right, it's an inaccurate name for what happens. Oftentimes when young people come out as queer or trans, their religious institution, their families think that that's an illness, and conversion therapy is what is used to describe the sort of combination of emotional torture, of psychological torture that oftentimes happens in camps or with a one-on-one therapist. The idea is that these young people will be fixed, right? The idea is that we're not born gay or not born as trans individuals, right? That there's a defect and that can be fixed. And in New Mexico a few years ago, we banned the practice of conversion therapy for minors, basically saying, look, you cannot put somebody under the age of 18 through this forced emotional, psychological torture to try to change who they inherently are, you know, and if somebody is an adult, has conflicted feelings about this stuff and they want to seek out some sort of counseling, as an adult, we can make those rational decisions, right? But we all should be able to acknowledge the lifelong trauma that putting a 12 or 13 or 15-year-old kid through this sort of abuse really causes and what it does. And New Mexico is one of the first 5 states in the country to ban conversion therapy for minors. And I'm super proud of that, that work that happened at EQNM. So thank you for the reminder.
You bet, you bet. And but let me keep you back on track since I interrupted. You were going through kind of the core mission and functions at EQNM. I don't want to get you off track, but I do think that definition was helpful and that narrative was helpful.
Absolutely.
Explanation, not narrative. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for the reminder about that. Yeah, and so, you know, we've had a lot of really phenomenal policy victories over the 28 years. As I said, our work is really intersectional and it's broad. And so in this last legislative session, we were active on legislation like the paid sick leave policy, which is important because LGBTQ folks need access to mental health care, but we can't see a counselor or a therapist if we can't afford the time off to go see the therapist, right? We have the opportunity to end the HIV and AIDS epidemic, but folks have to see a doctor to get access to those medications. And so you got to be able to take time off to see the doctor, right? We also led on the New Mexico Civil Rights Act, thanks to Representative Lewis, Chairwoman Lewis, and Speaker Egoff for really championing that. And I think right now is an important time to just to take a moment to talk about why the New Mexico Civil Rights Act was so important. You know, we're celebrating LGBTQ Pride Month. Pride is an opportunity to remember and celebrate what happened during the Stonewall riots in 1969 in New York City. And it is broadly considered to be the beginning, although we know it wasn't the beginning, but it's a major marker in the fight for LGBTQ civil rights. And it was a fight for LGBTQ rights, but it was really a fight against police brutality, right? And so we should just be, you know, I try to take a moment whenever possible during Pride Month to remind folks that what was happening at that time was obviously the laws were very different. But what happened regularly at the Stonewall Inn and so many other places was that police would raid these bars. They would arrest people who were LGBT. They would, their faces and their names would be published in the newspapers, ruining their entire lives. But before they even accomplished all of that, they were especially brutal physically to these folks, right? And so we have heard stories of trans women at these bars whose faces were shoved into dish pans to forcibly scrub their makeup off. And so, you know, EQNM was so proud to work with Speaker Egoff and Chairwoman Lewis on the New Mexico Civil Rights Act, in large part because I think we've all acknowledged continuously the fight for accountability for law enforcement officers when they act outside of their scope is not over. And that was really the beginning of the modern LGBTQ civil rights movement. And so we were really excited to work on that. And a whole lot, I could talk for hours about the legislation we worked on during the session alone. But our mission really is to think about all of those barriers that are set up systemically that prevent our community from thriving, and try to pull those barriers down through policy, through culture shift, and through public education.
I love that. Thank you for taking us back to the origin of the modern civil rights movement as it relates to the LGBTQIA+ community. I posted a ton of links just now in case folks want to go back a little later. I've got a news article from Harvard, the New York Times piece where the commissioner, to your point, this was just sheer police brutality. And so the police actions were wrong. The commissioner finally admitted that in 2019, I think it was, 50 years later. I think 50 years. Do I have that right, Marshall? Right?
Yep.
James O'Neill, the commissioner there. So that's on there. A couple of history links. Everybody knows I'm a history.com. I just love that page, and they get it right almost all the time. So check those out if you will, please. And thank you for taking us back to that. That might be a nice segue. So let me remind you folks, I'd love for you to join me in maybe donating $18 to Life and to EQNM this morning. I put that up. I'll put that link in the comments again, and ask you to join Aleli and me with our small contribution, which makes a little bit of a difference. Because not only will you make that contribution that makes a difference, you'll then make sure that you're tied into all the communications that come from EQNM, which are very measured. I never feel like EQNM overloads my inbox. I get about 250 to 300 emails daily, but EQNM is never one of those that I am disappointed to receive. I never feel like they've overloaded me, and everything they send out is very, very rich and does a great job of directing my attention to an important issue or matter of the day. Particularly, I think with Marshall at the helm, they do a phenomenal job when it comes to legislative alerts and helping us understand the gravity of things like the Civil Rights Bill here in New Mexico and its impact and importance to the LGBTQIA+ community. So you took us back kind of Stonewall. Now take us to today. For Marshall Martinez, the executive director, the incredible leader of the visionary that sets the tone, the pace, which is always a quick pace, forward for this movement in New Mexico. It really is for the movement in New Mexico. EQNM is the vehicle, but I see you as the leader in the continued movement in New Mexico. Today, Pride 2021, June 2021. What is Pride about for you? When somebody says, what's this Pride thing? I mean, we were at the vigil together. You heard some of the comments I made, but for you, tell us as the leader of this organization, maybe, but also on a personal note, because I know your journey is a complicated journey, but one that has empowered so many people because you share it with such authenticity and gravity and power, and I'm grateful for that, Marshall. So maybe speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, you know, it's Pride is so many things for me, right? And I immediately think about my very first Pride Festival in Albuquerque when I was just 19 years, not even quite 19 years old yet. It was shortly before my 19th birthday. And, you know, growing up in Alamogordo, we didn't have sort of a Pride Festival. And so
for folks that don't know the geography of New Mexico, yeah. Alamogordo is the county seat for Otero County. Need I say more?
Right.
Like Otero County. I'm sure that rings a bell for some of the activity and some of the leadership that the state auditor has had to push back on in Otero County, because they just don't know where the boundaries are and what's appropriate and what's not. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there because not everybody realizes Alamogordo. Sometimes they think of White Sands, like somehow they think Alamogordo, they think White Sands, but it's a base community and it is extremely conservative. And that's the backdrop in which Marshall Martinez was trying to find his fullness, where he was trying to become the best version and fullest version of himself he was created to be. And I just want everybody to understand that, because particularly in the I-25 corridor, we have this sense of inclusivity. And we have 33 counties in New Mexico, and they don't all sit on the I-25 corridor. Marshall, take it away. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. No, thank you for that reminder. Yeah, so I grew up in Alamogordo, and I will say, very conservative community. I think my mom is still watching. She was watching for a little while. I grew up with the most loving, accepting, inclusive, supportive family. And so while Alamogordo is a very conservative, sometimes hateful community, not everybody there is. And so shout out to my mom and my stepdad and my grandma and my aunt, who are all still in that community and phenomenal. So when I think about what pride means to me, I immediately am struck by the memory of being 18 years old, almost 19 years old at my first Pride Festival here in Albuquerque. And what I saw were hundreds of queer people and trans people. I saw drag queens, and there was an organization not particularly active anymore called Dykes on Bikes. And so all these lesbians on motorcycles who made me feel very safe, as it turns out. But all of these folks who were able to be together in public as their authentic selves, right? And for me, the first thing I think about when I think about what pride means in 2021 is that it is still crucial for us to have spaces and have the support to be who we are publicly in a way that feels safe and accepting, right? A step beyond that, pride is a remembrance of the people who started this movement. It's a remembrance of the trans women of color who threw bricks at Stonewall, and the gay and bisexual men who died in the HIV and AIDS epidemic, right? It's a remembrance of the lesbian women who forced their way into the women's liberation movement, the so-called Lavender Menace. It's a name that I love, by the way, to the dismay of some folks like Betty Friedan, forced their way into that movement and said, hey, this movement has to be about more than straight white women and their autonomy from their husbands. It's got to be about economic security and healthcare access and all of those things. So it's a remembrance of that, and it's a doubling down on the activism we have to do. Right? It is a recommitment to acknowledging that all of our work isn't done yet, right? That we still don't have universal access to healthcare in the LGBTQ community, and that impacts us, right? As people who
keep going, because that's a perfect segue. I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is one of the things I wanted to talk about today is how EQNM sees its role. And you put your foot in so many spaces that people don't think you belong, or that they wouldn't see the natural connection of you having that face in that place of EQNM in issues like whether it's women's reproductive rights. People can kind of think about that. They can kind of think about the New Mexico Civil Rights Act, but they wouldn't necessarily think of you on issues like the paid sick leave or even legalizing cannabis. And people should know that you helped on that issue, that EQNM took a position. EQNM was an advocate, was a stakeholder. And I just think, I don't want you to leave that track of the work not being done, because I think there's work that you're doing that people don't even naturally think of you having an important role in, and you're doing it. So I don't want you to miss the opportunity to share that.
Not at all. Thank you. You're queuing up for me, actually. So the effects, the TV station network Effects has been running a documentary, a 6-piece documentary called Pride. And so it's, one episode per decade starting in the 60s, right? And I was watching it and was struck by, in the 70s, one of the calls to action that came out of the LGBTQ community was, we are everywhere. And I think that really, to me, speaks to how I want to do the work at Equality New Mexico. There is no such thing as an LGBTQ issue and then an other issue. We live in all 33 counties in New Mexico. We work in every sector of work, from cashiers at 7-Elevens to attorneys and doctors, right? And we are a part of every single family in New Mexico. And so what that means to me is that all the issues are queer and trans issues, right? Access to healthcare, that's a queer and trans issue. It's especially important to us because we need access to mental health care. We need access to STI prevention, HIV prevention, treatment, right? But cannabis is an LGBTQ issue for two reasons. One, because queer and trans people of color, as we know, were over-criminalized during the prohibition periods of cannabis for so long. Mass incarceration is a problem. We know Black, Indigenous, and people of color over-criminalized to begin with. But then imagine being a queer person or a trans person and incarcerated, especially in the 80s, in the 90s, right? And the way that our folks were treated, the way that our folks are treated today in detention centers and in prisons and jails. And then also, and shout out to Rep Martinez, my state rep, who is fortunate to have me in his district and share my last name. But for being able to say, look, we have an opportunity to build a new economy in New Mexico, a new market that lifts up Black and brown folks. And the first thing I thought of was those of us who are queer and trans who don't necessarily pass and can't get access to those professional level jobs because of the way we appear there. It's against the law to discriminate. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen, right? And so think about the opportunities for young queer and trans folks to be able to grow a little bit of cannabis, those small licenses, and earn a living from home, being a gardener. I know it's more technical than that, but having the opportunity to do something like that and earn a living and find economic security, right? And so absolutely all of these issues are LGBTQ issues because we're everywhere, right? Because we are everywhere. And I think that for me, circling back to what pride means doubling down on that commitment to continue to do that work, right? To make sure that we're continuing to pave a path for people in our community to find economic security, emotional security, and all of those things that we need to be able to thrive.
And let me just say, when Marshall Martinez says doubling down, that's like going all in for anybody else, because he's already got a big bet on the table and he's doubling down. So I'm just telling you that you don't want to talk about impact. I mean, Marshall Martinez is really the embodiment of living a life of impact and service. And I talk about that all the time, right? Like when they put me 6 feet under and they screw me in real tight so I don't come back to live a second life in New Mexico, that's how much I love living here. Hopefully they'll be able to say he lived a life of impact and made a difference. And I just know that, Marshall, that's what you do every day in your work. And it really is, that doubling down is not insignificant because you're already making a big difference in the community on that work. So thanks for helping us understand why EQNM is occupying such a broad landscape, maybe is the way to put it, or finds itself present. I mean, these economic justice issues. Look, you talk about any marginalization, any kind of infringement on rights, you just fill in the blank of which right you're talking about, and you'll see an overrepresentation of harm as it relates to the LGBTQIA plus community, whether it's economic harm, physical harm, lack of access issues. These issues all hit that community at a far deeper level and a far greater source of disparity than any other group. Look, let's, Marshall, you know this issue is important to me as it relates to our young people who either have intimated the act of suicide or actually completed the act of suicide. And when I think about the articles I've read and the people I've talked to, and literally in your community, in our community, of your community, and I think about the pain and how that manifests, whether it's in things such as what could be deemed insignificant relatively, from cutting and things of self-harm and infliction of pain, to actually intimating and sometimes committing suicide. And those rates amongst transgender youth are, at least from what I read, Marshall, again, I'm in a space where I care deeply, but I'm not an expert. You are the expert. And so feel free to bump me back. But what I read is those rates among transgendered youth are literally off the chart, and huge risk and a huge blind spot because we are not comfortable talking about it. Half of the community that's not part of the LGBTQIA plus community don't even know what transgender means, much less willing to talk about what that feels like and what that journey looks like. So can you speak to that? Because I know we've only got 15 minutes left, and for me, this is important. And this show is always about putting individuals and work in its best light, but we can't do that if the public doesn't really understand what that place is.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're spot on that the numbers are outrageously high, especially among trans youth, right? Close to 60% of trans youth will have thought about the act of suicide before turning 18, right? Which is a staggering number. The number is a little bit lower for gay, lesbian, and bisexual youth, but it's hovering right now between 35 and 40%, which is still far, far too high, right? And what we know about that is a couple of things. First of all, that comes from the broader societal and cultural messages that we are often hearing when we're young, that there is something wrong with us. And as we're in Pride Month, and as I'm calling on people to double down on their activism, the number one thing you can do as an activist, especially as an ally to this community, make sure that the young people around you know that no matter who they are, no matter their sexual orientation or gender identity, they are loved and supported. The number one thing that reduces the rates of suicidal thoughts or suicidal actions among queer and trans youth is just to make sure that young people know they are loved and accepted. And I'm going to take just a second to talk and make a brief plug. I was able to do an interview with Generation Justice, the youth-run radio show. That interview will air on Sunday, which is tomorrow. And one of the young people on the show asked me, how can we be better allies? And I just want to share what I said then. I knew that I was queer probably when I was about 12 years old. But it didn't come out until I was almost 17. And the reason is because there were some adults in my life who I don't even think intentionally did so, but who made jokes or just sort of sometimes made offhanded comments that made me feel like there was something wrong with being gay. And once I came out, they were supportive and loving and, you know, all of those things. So I don't think it ever occurred to them. I don't think they were truly homophobic. And so I just caution folks to remember that our words are so powerful and they're incredibly impactful and influential on young people who are in the corner of the room reading a book when you're having this conversation, who may be listening to music, but are kind of hearing a little bit of it. Right? And so be cautious and be intentional about the way we talk about things like the LGBTQ community and these broader issues, because someone is listening. Chances are someone who's queer or trans is listening and you just don't know it yet, right? And so the number one way we can lower those suicide rates is just by reinforcing that young people will be loved and accepted no matter who they are. And also, we obviously can't ignore the last year. So happy to have seen you in person a few times in the last couple of weeks. It's so great to be out in the world and in person again. Especially in rural communities in a state like New Mexico, queer and trans young people find our networks of support at school. Right? Younger generations are more accepting. And so we find our love and our support and our network at school. And so coming out of this COVID-19 crisis, and I'm so grateful that New Mexico shut down the way we did, and we really did work hard to flatten the curve. Proud of a public health expert at the top of our state government. But we can't forget that young people who find their support and love at school were stuck at home for a year. Right? And so coming out of this crisis, one of the ways that folks can double down on their activism, especially, is to make sure that we're creating more spaces for LGBTQ young people in our rural communities to be loved and accepted and their authentic selves outside of school. Because if we're ever in a situation like this again, those folks are going to be incredibly isolated, right? They're going to be incredibly isolated all over again. And so I'm hopeful one of the lessons we've learned from this is that we have to create these spaces in more places than just at school, right? One of the things, I talked a lot about legislative session, and we do a lot of political work, of course, and because that's how you and I know each other, that's my passion, and, campaigns and fast moving work. But we're also working to shift the public narrative. And that means putting folks in touch with the Trans Resource Center of New Mexico, where Adrian Lawyer, a friend of mine, will do a phenomenal training for your family, for your workplace, for your social group, for your peer group, right? Any of those folks, just to explain, it's called a Trans 101 training, just to sort of explain to folks who don't quite understand and make those connections, help with language and help with the understanding, because we have to shift the whole broad public narrative, right? I feel strongly we elect good people, we hold them accountable, we pass good policies. That's good work. It's critical work, and I'm happy to do it. But we can't do that in a vacuum. We have to change the public narrative. And that really means folks having conversations about LGBTQ folks. And also, just as a note during Pride Month, and I want to say thank you, Brian, so much for inviting me to share this space with you during Pride Month, and I'm excited. And so I want to make sure that this doesn't come off in a way that I'm calling you out. But also, I just want to say to folks, we are queer all year long. We are LGBTQ people who live in these communities, as you said earlier, 365 days a year. So you don't have to call us on June 5th and ask us to do a training for you. We also can educate and engage and mobilize in November. We can do so in January. At EQNM, we do it year round. And so just to remind folks, Pride Month isn't the only time to engage in these conversations, because we live these lives all year long. And so that gives lots of space and lots of room to have these conversations.
I love that, Marshall, well stated. And I don't feel called out at all, especially because I didn't wait till now to bring on these issues that are important to your community. I've taken the liberty of doing that throughout the last 15 months of Cafecito con Colon. And so, no, I think, and look, frankly, your job is to hold us accountable, right? Like I appreciated so much, and I don't know if you saw my post, but one of the speakers at the vigil did such a good job. I don't know whether, well, I'm going to call him out. But he did such a beautiful job. Jose Antonio did such a good job of basically saying, look, it's not enough to just elect good people. You got to hold them accountable. And once we're elected, right now, I've 893 days of awesome. And I hope I've comported myself in a way that is consistent with what I talked about when I campaigned for the opportunity to serve New Mexico, that I'm the same ally and advocate I was before I got elected and during the campaign trail and now in service. But that doesn't mean that I won't make mistakes. And so I need people like you to hold me accountable. And frankly, you've done that. I mean, I don't ever remember you having to call me out because I blew it. But I do know that you've stood me up and said, look, now's the time. Like you're a great ally, and we need the allyship now more than ever. Can you help with this? And that's that's perfect. And so I just want to just affirm what you just said, but by saying you never have to like shade it, like just bring it. Like you just always say, no, now's the time. Like, I don't care what you did yesterday, it's today, and we need your help today. Like that should be with me. And it should be with every elected official, because I know that we come to your table and say, hey, can I have your endorsement? And when I get it and I'm on the campaign trail, yeah, it's on my Facebook page, it's on my Twitter feed, it's on my Instagram. And then what? Right? Like my job is to make sure that I'm there to answer the call when you make it. And in a best case scenario, I'm actually calling you saying, I haven't heard from you in a while, Marshall, what's going on? Mm-hmm. But that'll be my aspirational goal. Because I don't know that I can say I've done that. Although we did reach out and we got you on today, which is good news. Look, we got 5 more minutes left, Marshall. I want to take this conversation anywhere you want it to go that I haven't allowed you to be so far. Let me just say that I did put up TGRCs, and I'm a tiny donor and a big supporter. I remember the early events for that organization and for that resource center. I've been to events there. I've been to shows there. I haven't been to as many trainings as I'd like, and so I need to do a better job with that. But I posted the link to their training efforts, their main landing page. I also posted in the comments section a great article by the HuffPost. And let me just say this, to Marshall's point, words are singularly the most powerful force available to humanity. We can choose to use this force constructively with words of encouragement or destructively using words of despair. Words have energy and power with the ability to help, to heal, to hinder, to hurt, to harm, to humiliate, and to humble. Let us use those words to lift up one another. Let us use those words that Marshall talked about of love and support. And I quoted Marshall in my comments, and I posted that HuffPost article to support what he's saying, which is our words matter, particularly our words that we choose among and in the presence of our young people. So let's lift them up. Marshall shouldn't have been 12 to 18 trying to find his fullness in a way that was comfortable for him to be able to share it with the rest of us, because I'm better off because he shares his fullness every day. And I wish he could have started when he was 12. So with that being said, let me just turn it back over to you, Marshall. Let me ask, I know a couple people donated online this morning to back up Aleli and I's contribution. Please continue to do that as we let Marshall wrap up the last few minutes of our episode of Cafecito con Colon on this Sábado Gigante. Marshall, take it away, my friend.
I failed to mention this at the beginning of our conversation, and so I have to say, to your point about always being able to ask you to step into your allyship, I am so grateful that we have had a relationship that has, you've never denied my phone call, or if you have, you've returned it right away. You've never refused a conversation. And so I am so grateful. And you spoke about being party chair and being one of the first to step out on marriage equality in such a bold and strong way. And so I just have to say, I've been doing this work for a long time in New Mexico. There are some folks who I think are champions. There are some folks who I think of as friends. And then there's a very, very small group of people who I think are both. And you definitely fall into that very small category. And so I just have to give you a shout out and say thank you for always being authentic and honest and having integrity and being a friend and a champion for this community. And as is evidence, you didn't wait until June 10th to say, hey, it's Pride Month. We got to get you on Facebook Live. And so I appreciate that as well. And thank you, to everybody who's considering supportive equality in New Mexico. Here's the last thing that I'll say as I keep talking about doubling down on that commitment to activism. We've been talking a lot about youth. We've talked a lot about especially trans youth. We have phenomenal policies for trans youth in Albuquerque public schools, in Santa Fe public schools, and in Las Cruces public schools. And in this election cycle, we have some folks running for the school board in Albuquerque and in Las Cruces who are running solely because they want to undo those inclusion policies, because they want to attack trans youth. And so, because, I wouldn't be effective in this work if I wasn't good at making the hard ask and the pitch at the end of every conversation. And so my pitch is, if you can, donate to EQNM so we can call these folks out publicly during the election cycle. But at the very least, don't forget that those school board members have a lot of influence, right? The state legislature and the governor, they do great work, but the school board sets policy that will impact an entire generation at a time, right? And when we're young, they will determine whether we experience more trauma or less for the rest of our lives. So don't forget about the school board elections as we're talking about the mayor's race and all of those things. And do the best that you can to engage with, if not EQNM, another advocacy organization that's doing work to call those folks out, because it's 2021 and we should be moving forward into greater inclusion, more celebrations, more love and compassion, not moving backwards, right? Let's celebrate the Stonewall riots and Pride by moving forward for queer and trans youth, especially by protecting them, especially at the school district level. So that's my pitch. Give money, give time, give energy to make sure that especially our trans and queer youth in our public schools are protected and feel safe and loved. And happy Pride. I can't say it enough. Happy Pride.
I love it. Happy Pride is exactly right. Marshall Martinez, Executive Director of EQNM, incredible community advocate now for decades and just really making a difference every day. He's living a life of impact in a space where we need to do the work. We've made progress, but there's still so much to do. And I'm grateful that he is helping lead that conversation, setting a table with stakeholders where people feel empowered to carry the message. And so thank you, Marshall Martinez, for that. Please do, as he asked, make your contribution to EQNM today. We definitely want to pay attention to those school board races. They're now on cycle. So I think more people will be engaged. And it's important that we pay attention to ask the tough questions. And I, unfortunately or fortunately, in some ways, those people who are stepping up to step on the LGBTQIA community, they're actually going to lead with that in their campaign in some ways. So we'll know who they are. But let's help make sure that EQNM is able to shine a spotlight on their agenda and make sure that we get it right when it comes to our school board elections. So with that, Marshall Martinez, I just want to wish you a beautiful day. Happy Pride. Orgullo Feliz. We're just thrilled that you are leading this important organization in New Mexico. Call on me anytime, hold me accountable. Thank you for your gracious and very, very generous comments earlier. I don't take those lightly. I'll continue to try and earn that love and respect that you share with me. And to all my friends out there, my Cafecito colleagues, it's always good to have a Friday and Saturday come along because I miss you. I miss doing this daily, but you know I'm out there working hard for New Mexico and I'll continue to do that in different ways, but I'll always look forward to seeing you at least once a week on Cafecito con Colón. Have a beautiful Saturday. Thanks for being with us on this Sabido Gigante with EQNM. Make your contributions. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. We'll see you, Mr. Martinez.
Bye now. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.